And I'm struggling with it. It's good that I didn't understand that when I started, okay? Because had I understood that, I would be paralyzed and wouldn't do anything. My mom, a long time ago, when I was a kid, I asked her, like, can I do that? And she says, I think you might succeed because you don't understand that it is impossible.
Today I had the privilege to talk with Tymofiy Mylovanov. He came from Ukraine to MIT to the United States to talk about his journey making change in Ukraine. I learned so many things from this conversation, and I hope that you would enjoy it. Stay tuned.
Okay.
So, how is it like to be a human?
To be a human?
Yes.
I do not know, because I have not been other things, so maybe I don't remember if I've ever been. So I don't know any. I feel like I've had 5 or 7 lives in this life, and in that sense, it's great to be able to move very freely between different roles, between very different lives. I did sports professionally a long time ago, and I did business, and I did academia and politics, and in my mind these are separate things, but I also worry about darkness in humans, kind of destructive darkness, and which has manifested itself throughout history, and I hoped it wouldn't in this century, but it does. And so we in the Western world and the democratic world tend to focus on the good things, like we're in MIT, so it's all positive. But the question is, to me also, why is it that humans almost at any moment, when they get in groups, they become vulnerable to authoritarianism or, suppression of freedom, persecution, war crimes, and that's on my mind because I'm from Ukraine, and I've been in the war for 3 years. But then if you look outside of Ukraine, it's just a tiny part of the world lives in a free world. And so, it's an old question, I think, whether democracies or free societies is an exception for the humans groups, or it's something which is possible to achieve for everyone. Should it be achieved? I really don't want to live as a human. I think that's the most important thing for me, to be free. I don't want others to, I don't want to be scared. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want others to tell me how to live. That's a very important, basic driving force for me. But, is this how humans are?
Is that the default?
Yeah. Or even if it's not, default is one, look at this, but the other one is a stable outcome, Here everyone's, on the streets appear to be taking it for granted, but it's a minority on the planet Earth, right? It's an exception, this state, and it has to be maybe understood better, should be understood better, and maybe protected better. I don't know how to protect it, though, if you're free, sort of, I don't know. So, but that's how it is for me. If you ask my question, it's a question about how to be human. And the other one is important, is how to be more spiritual. For me, that's an important question at this stage of my career or life cycle.
Yeah.
Because for the most part of my life, I didn't care about spirituality. Yep.
And now?
Well, the war does things to you, and then leadership positions do, and being in politics and managing, kind of creating things the way it operates in Ukraine, life operates in Ukraine, is that you can create a lot of new things, but you don't have the sort of institutional environment where everyone takes for granted here, So for people here, for example, or in Europe, if they have an idea and they convince other people of idea, they basically can implement it if they have a desire and skills to implement it. But that relies on really a lot of institutions around, a lot of elements of the system. And people take it as air. It exists there. And we don't remember the importance of oxygen until we get underwater, for example. And there we get reminded of it real quick, and it becomes the most important thing. The same, I think, in most societies. If you have an idea, and you don't have environments to implement them, you actually have to build your own environment to implement your ideas. And that's what, to be able to operate in Ukraine as an academic or as an economist or as an educator, actually had to build an institution which has much more than a typical institution in terms of capability. So, and that's only so I can have a career there. And most people who went to Ukraine came back as diaspora or stayed in Ukraine. They have not been able to achieve what they would have achieved here. Because simply this environmental infrastructure was not there. And now, I think about how to give these platforms that people don't need to work. I mean, I don't want to kind of trivialize that. Everyone says, we have to give people a chance. In most of the societies, there's no infrastructure for people to be free. Free in terms of creativity, for example. And I don't know how to create it. I think we have been able to carve a space in Ukraine at the Kyiv School of Economics where we can do that. But, is this a random fluke or is it a part of something bigger? I don't know. So in that sense, I think spiritually, somewhat important questions for me. What, how to think about freedom, actually. Is it even relevant? I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't be free, I don't know.
It sounds like you almost wear the hat of an architect of freedom in some ways. There is some infrastructure that here we take for granted. Here you go and you see these people in the street, they walk, and if they have an idea and they have the skills and the competence, they can just act on it, go to convince some people, and then they will get the resources, everything will be in place, and they can just be creative and do. And then you are saying you go home, and then you look at the streets and you see something else. You see that it's a little bit harder to move in some ways, in a metaphoric way, right? Like it's.
And it's often in people's minds because they learn helplessness. People sort of try, or and it doesn't work, or they get punished by the society often, not even by the government.
So it's the culture.
Yes, I think everything is culture because you look at what's happening in the United States, and we talk about economists. I'm an economist. We talk about institutions, but really, institutions is just a formal version of a culture, in my view, because if we really think that freedom of speech is important or rule of law is important, there should be people who are willing to protect it. And it's not about protests per se or financing or contribution. It's about everyday small steps, how people interact and what they do. And so any change or any both suppression of freedom or protection of freedom requires millions of people taking certain steps, right? Telling a student in a classroom that he or she is stupid with her idea, or is not respectful enough, to a higher authority. So the moment I see that someone says, "Oh, you're not respectful enough," that's not merit-based to me, and that's a sign of suppression of freedom. Because, why should I care if someone is respectful or not? Respectful is about maintaining, the right notion of something, of relationship in the society. So a person who is free should be able to break this notion. If you're not hurting other people, why should you be respectful? I remember being in a university In Ukraine, just when the Soviet Union collapsed, I was a student, a couple of years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I was sitting on a floor in a math department, and the chair of the department took time to scold me for sitting on the floor because it was not respectful of mathematics, and I couldn't understand it why then, and I can't understand now. But I understand overall the notion of what he was trying to say is that this is a university, this is mathematics. If you respect the field, you have to follow certain rules. And I think people who are free disagree with that, or should disagree with that. And then, some societies are more accepting of this and others are not. And I think what is good in the US in particular, well, although not everywhere, and I think it's been challenged all the time, especially in politics, but what's good here is that there is a way to break the rules without being threatening to others, because societies start to protect or defend. They go defensive when they feel threatened. Like this math department chair would feel that he is threatened by students who do not follow the rules.
Because everything stands because.
Exactly, of these rules, and people are unruly, and it's true, people are unruly, so I don't know. I think that's that's a challenge for most of the societies to, like, I'm at Pittsburgh here, and they can't find a way at the University of Pittsburgh. They can't find a way to keep me engaged with the University of Pittsburgh because I break the rules. I'm in Ukraine all the time. And they say, well, this is against the rules, so either you go on leave or you have to get fired. This is the same story, by the way. It's like anti-freedom story.
Yeah.
And why are they doing it? Because they're afraid that if I'm allowed to do that, everyone else will be allowed to do that,
And then the question is how to create this margin of freedom so people can be also creative.
Yes, exactly. Without, I don't know how. I think the question is how to make people unafraid, because we are all,
So they would loosen the strictness.
Yeah. So I think evolutionary. I guess the survival is more important than success or creativity. The first order of business is not to get eaten by an animal, and and if you hear a new noise, the first reaction is fear, and only then you see, you first worry if you can be eaten by that new noise, and only that you check if you can eat that, right? Because if you start checking, if your first reaction would be, can I eat that, you will not live for long. Okay. So first you have to, when something new happens, you have to get afraid, evolutionary, because like you die only once, and it's almost cliche, life has to win every day, death has to win only once, right? So I think that's why people are afraid of new things, and it's ingrained. And then so the question that some of the societies, or no, subcultures actually in the US, is not everywhere, but in top universities, in top companies, in the Silicon Valley, among startups, among some scientists, but not everywhere. There is this notion that new is good, but overall that's not the case. And so the question is how to undo this fear of the new among people. So I don't know how to do it. I mean, there are ways you want to sort of smooth out, and at least that's what we do at the Kyiv School of Economics. And then, societies which are not used to new, it's even worse, okay? You can compensate it a little with incentives by saying, okay, if you do new things, you will build a unicorn, or you will become famous, you will win a Nobel Prize.
But they have this stack of beliefs that they grew up with. So it's almost not enough to just add this new layer as, just one thing up there. It could change some stuff, but
a little bit.
We need to remember,
So that's even worse, because if you're gonna, one thing you're doing something new, another thing you're threatening the beliefs of people. That's much worse than just doing something new, New could be forgiven, insulting people with the fact that they could have lived a different life.
Yeah.
and they didn't, simply because it was a mindset, makes an enemy out of that person. So in societies which are rigid with some, very traditional norms, we see people being killed for, deviating, being dressed differently, okay? In some societies, and that's an extreme case, but, so I think that I don't even know how to do that, I'm only thinking about in the environment in which you are not threatening the beliefs of others, you're simply carving out the space for yourself and saying, listen, this is where I am, I'm not bothering you, I'm just going to do my new thing. I'm not saying you're wrong, you have, you're right, it's fine, I'm not threatening you, I'm not doing a revolution, I'm just trying to, and I think that's what I've learned is actually working. So I don't think going against the existing beliefs of the society is going to be successful, with some exceptions like revolutions. Okay, where there is sufficient critical mass to bring social change, then that can happen. But as an individual, you can try to lead that, which is very dangerous, but you can. But I think in other environments where they're not, ripe for revolutions, you want to simply build an alternative positive agenda. So you basically say, I don't bother you, but this is what we can do, and it's good for everyone, and this positive agenda, you want it to be sort of, and that's one trick I think we have been using, is you want to remove the novelty effect from this.
It's not new. It's just... It happened before.
Well, we call it vaccination. So you do vaccination with new ideas when you feel that the society or someone might not take you. Well, it doesn't matter. It could be your audience, it could be your parents, it could be your children, it could be your friends or whoever. You start dropping things early enough, but not completely, so that they get used to it. So in the environments in which there is no culture of innovation, you have to vaccinate so that the society or the culture doesn't push back against innovation. And you vaccinate by dropping in, making new ideas, not new. So you don't have to explain the ideas, and you don't go like with a vaccine, you don't go all the way with the full-scale virus, But you give a little bit of a taste that everyone gets used to it, and you remove the novelty effect. And so you remove this effect of, it's a new sound in the bushes, and I am threatened by this. You sort of, I've heard it 5 times or 10 times, nothing happened. So that's not scary anymore. Now we can discuss something, okay? So we do that, and we do it within organizations when I do change management, or we do it for the policy change or societal change when we want to do a culture change. So here's an example of a culture change. In Ukraine. So the first year of the war, people are afraid to create, sort of fundraising events for anything outside of military. Furthermore, even for military, people are afraid culturally to create get-together physical events, because it is perceived to be inappropriate. While people are dying in trenches, you're dining in black tie. That's out of place. That's threatening, in a sense that there are some people who are dying and some people who are, war is not for them. So that can be perceived like that. But it is also true that if you want to raise money, it is important that people get at least in a reasonable mood. You at least, pragmatically, you have to feed them something, because if they're hungry, they're not donating, okay? So you have to get them together, and you have to generate this aha moment where they look at each other's eyes and they're happy, even if it's for a moment. And they think that could be something different, there's future, there's hope. And then they are willing to give their resources. Instead of being threatened during a war and save money to protect themselves or give money to their family soldier or something like that, they would be willing to give money to education or to health or to something beyond the immediate needs. For that, you have to get people relaxed in some form, at least mentally. And you have to also give them a social proof that others are doing it. And so it is easier to get that change actually offline among some leaders who then later go online and generate a change, rather than try to push it just online. So you have to have some physical space events, and people are afraid to do it. And so what you do it, you start basically vaccinating. You announce that there is this idea, and then you tell what's going to happen, and you explain over time, and then they sort of come down because they see that there's no pushback, there's no toxicity around this, and then they all come together. They see that a fundraiser is happening, and it is okay to give money to education or to hospitals, not just to military, and then, it changes. So we've done a fundraiser like that, and after that, it was the first fundraiser physical in Ukraine in 2022, and after that, everyone started doing fundraisers. But because before that, people were afraid to do that, exactly because it was novel and it could be perceived wrongly. So you sometimes it doesn't work. Vaccination is also a good idea because you try to vaccinate and you see that the body, the organism, is not responding well. So then you stop. So for example, I had some ideas about some fundraisers, and the team had some ideas, and we started talking about it on social media, and got such a pushback on this that we scraped that and apologized and didn't actually do anything. So this idea of removing novelty from anything which is novel, I think it's one way to go. What I've learned in very hard way in Ukraine.
Because at the beginning it's like, oh, there's this brand new thing.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do this thing. It's just such a great idea. And then they look and they almost a little bit scared.
Punishes you, yes. And then you ask, and you say, everyone benefits from that, but no one cares, If people get afraid, they will, kill your idea.
Even if it's good for them.
Yeah. There are so many good ideas. There are libraries, for centuries. People can go and read books and
they don't
get educated, right? And pick up great ideas and improve their lives. They don't do that, right?
So many areas for improvement that are untapped.
Right. Yes, but it's, in some sense, it's also very human to self-sabotage, right? So... and it's a right of every human to, like when I teach a class here in the States, often, especially management class, I say often that it's your, constitutional right to screw up your life, That's a very American culture, no one's going to patronize you, no one is going to tell you, how you should have or should not have behaved, The opportunities are there. But in many societies, that's not the case, right? In many societies, the society will tell you what you should do, right? Your parents will tell you what you should be, right? There's specific roles and you have to play them, right? So in that sense, freedom also means that you can make a lot of almost fatal mistakes, right, in your life. And if you let people do that, they will not achieve necessarily the best, but so it's two-edged sword, I think. When you don't force people, or but I prefer not to be forced, frankly, personally.
Yeah, it's a decision.
Yes,
it's a decision. As a leader, it's a decision.
It is also a decision in which society to live. So in my life, I was so upset and pissed off by Ukrainian culture of the post-Soviet Union. I mean, now it's a very different culture. But in the 90s, when I decided to go and live in the States, it was very, it was very Soviet, not so post-Soviet kind of, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. I couldn't stand that. I could not stand that. And it felt, much better here, even though the pressure for me as, not speaking good English, not having relatives here and not having money, it was very difficult, but I think a lot of people have gone through that and nothing happened to them, nothing bad happened to them, only good things. It's not easy, but I kind of preferred that. Now, later, I decided to try to go back and maybe try to change there. So it's like a next level of evolution.
Evolution of change.
They say that in leadership there are stages, First you have to become a leader of yourself. And most people never reach that goal in life, You sort of follow, But, some people do. And then the second level is, I think, you have to lead organization around you, or people, or a group, a startup or something. And then the next one is you lead leaders around you, other people. So, and then I don't know what's the next one. I just don't know. But I think there are others. And
to be discovered.
Well, yeah. So I'm pretty sure there are others. But I'm now at the stage where with KC growing, it's not enough anymore. Sort of when I came from the States to Ukraine, I wanted to create an organization. So I wanted to lead. Like, first of all, I needed a meaning of life for myself. And this helping people, or believing that I can help through building institutions or building education, I thought that was a very noble, kind of meaning of life. Now, boy, I was wrong, because institutions mean nothing, it turns out.
Really?
Yeah, I think the United States is proving it now. Right now, we're living through this. Our belief in we'll see how the courts work out in case of the United States. But to talk about and we start with that, we're saying that, institutions, formal or informal, nothing else than just, yes, the culture, manifestations, elements of culture. So culture matters. And for the most of my life, I believed that I couldn't understand what culture means, and I said culture is some kind of bullshit. Basically people talk about culture or mentality.
And mentality, culture.
What
where is the culture? Show it to me. And it's like, where is it in the room? But then you realize.
Well, so people even talk about values, and in most cases, again, being from the Soviet Union, I sort of think that most people are bullshitting about values, and I hate.
I like the directness.
I hate when consultants, McKinsey guys or Deloitte, they come in and say, "Oh, you need to develop values for your organization," and because you don't have values, what is it? We don't have values. Are we valueless? And we survived somehow for 40 years being valueless. Maybe that's not that. And they say values will change everything. And then people write, like there are these skits all the time. You have to write down some bullshit about exclusiveness and innovation and, support.
But it's not
and
theirs.
Well, it's not sincere.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it's better. I talked to one very successful recently extremely successful high net worth individual, and he said, we were forced to write this bullshit too, but basically you have to live through values, you have to live them. If you don't live them, that doesn't mean anything.
Just on a piece of paper.
Yeah, so I think this sort of culture stuff is much more important than institution, and then it becomes very difficult to think of an educational platform like a university, which maintains or even better changes culture. Because on the one hand, you want to give freedom to people, but you want to have a culture of freedom. And if culture is not conducive to freedom, you actually have to force people or to create environments in which you force something, okay? So you always have to balance restriction and force, especially if you're bringing change with the value you want to bring as freedom. So, freedom means, you let people figure it out.
Yeah.
But if people don't want to figure it out, you force them to become free, you become a dictator, So, how do you build an institution, a university in a country like Ukraine, which changes culture? Where the end effect, if I wanted to change the culture, it's going to be military discipline culture. I have no problem with that. Right. I force that on people,
But your change is about loosening
how do I do that? Because how do I build an institution which forces people to change the culture, to become free? If people don't want to be free, maybe we shouldn't force them to be free,
Yeah.
So in that sense, my project, from the very beginning is a failure, because I'm sorry that it's very inconsistent. I want to create a very powerful institution in which I'm a very strong leader. Leader means I tell people, or I show, or I inspire, but I change their behavior. In which I want to create culture in which no one else can change people's behavior. People choose their behavior. Well, they're choosing now not to be free. That's fine with them. So there's this paradox.
Wow.
And it's also value-based paradox. A lot of revolutions happened because someone wanted to liberate someone who didn't want to be liberated. And Should we do it? If people don't want democracy, if countries are corrupt, authoritarian, should we try to do? Are we good at trying? Are we good? So it's all there's that question, and I'm struggling with it. It's good that I didn't understand that when I started, okay? Because had I understood that, I would be paralyzed and wouldn't do anything. Okay?
Because it will feel such a impossible mission. Impossible.
So my mom a long time ago. So she passed away. But a long time ago, when I was a kid, I wanted to do things, and I asked her can I do that? Can I? And she says, well, I don't want to tell you that you won't be able to do that. I think it's impossible what you're trying to do.
Wow.
But I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to be direct. I think you might succeed because you don't understand that it is impossible.
I want to remember this.
So in that sense, I think it was the university is the same. I simply didn't know that it's impossible to do. So and there are these more fundamental paradoxes that in university is supposed to be an environment of the free, but I want to create a culture change, and people themselves might not be willing to be free. And what do I impose on them? So it's a little bit like a church in some sense. You create a culture in which you show this culture to people, and you want still to find a balance where people say, okay, I like it, so I want to join that. I want to become like that, rather than, you come in and this is what you do in classes, you have to come up, we force you to come up with an innovative project, So I think it's very difficult, but it's great I didn't know that. So I thought it's all about institutions and teaching good economics and bringing academics. It's not about that. It's really about culture. I still don't understand anything about culture.
And how to change it.
No, I have no idea. But in the meantime, I think the university is doing well. It has become top 1, top 2 in the country, depending on the field. So, I don't know, probably. I don't know.
Maybe something works there.
Well, maybe, but I don't know. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like, when I imagine you as a change maker, as if you imagine you're swimming in the ocean. So it seems like you swim in an ocean. The water is not water, but honey. You want to swim and you want to move so fast, and it's like, oh, but we resist for change and we resist for this, and we can't. And what I hear is some. I don't know if it's a good way to call it limiting beliefs, but would you say limiting beliefs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fine, limiting beliefs, so people don't trust themselves. But I do have this, I constantly struggle with this, how much, I kind of, when I was a little bit less experienced, I would, my tendency would be to let people, I would make this mistake usually, basically. I would let people be free, meaning I would delegate things. And then I look at this and say, oh, this is shit, you have to do it that way, So I would let them make all them say and then overrule. So now I'm still doing that often, but I've learned to live for years, sometimes with decades, with people, in my view, doing something which hurts even the organization I'm building. And I think it's a process they have to learn. So, but I really have, it's the biggest challenge for me to sort of figure out.
Because then you would become that person that tells them you can't,
I don't want, but
and
I
you
have
can.
To, and then I don't have a justification why I tell them to do it that way.
So this is the constant struggle of embodying that quality within yourself, right? Because if that's the only way we know to...
So I'm maybe, I have two personalities. I mean, not it's the same personality, but basically sometimes I'm dictatorial and sometimes I'm completely laissez-faire. And finding the balance when to switch, it's a struggle for me.
Right. So we're about to finish soon. So what is...
But let me say, you basically, if you're not willing, in my view, in the environments which are, where you want to bring change, you have to own the result. And that means that you can try and play around and let people do what they want, but if it fails, you have to effect change. And it means that sometimes you have to drive through, brutally drive through. And then it's very, you have to watch yourself not to get carried away by this. But in the end of the day, it's you. In the end of the day, change is still more of a military thing. like in difficult environments, in toxic environments, or in like hostile environments. It's really like strong leadership in environments like Ukraine requires real focus on impact and delivery, and not accepting failure. I mean, this is still cliche, but you sort of have to, the one solution to this is move away from this philosophical discussion about freedom and formulate some measurable outcomes, or at least outputs, and then demand from yourself and from others that those are met. And then you kind of not thinking about freedom and culture, but you sort of focus on the results, and that means that sometimes you're dictatorial, and sometimes you like, if people are meeting and you do nothing, okay? So it becomes a little bit more functional. But I also don't know if it's the right thing to do, I don't know.
Wow. So what is the one thing in one sentence that you would like at least me to take home and remember? I would actually try to have a sticky note. I have yellow sticky notes next to my computer to remind myself, we are all growing up as leaders here, right? So what is one gift as a lesson that you would tell me, hey, write this thing to yourself? And I would look at it every day. I wake up in the morning and I would look at this thing. What would that thing be?
So in hostile environments, you must inspire people with what they think is impossible. So yeah, so if an environment is hostile, you have to give people a dream. Otherwise, they will not move. So you have to give people a dream in a hostile, non-hostile environment. I think that's the only reason, or the key. One reason for success is that seen, and what I do and what I've tried to do is to give people a different vision of what Ukraine can be. Now, if you can formulate it you can demonstrate it in a very small space, like, you come to the Kyiv School of Economics and you show how people, and then you say, now, this is a microcosm of that vision, but it exists, and now I want it to be bigger. That is so much easier. So first you want to build a prototype of the dream. In a hostile environment, you have to carve out basically preserve space where you can protect people, and you there create a microcosm or micro version of that dream. And then you bring people to that and say, this is the dream, and the dream means taking this and making it bigger 100 times, and that people will do. So people will do that. So you have to inspire people with a dream, but you have to prototype your dream in a hostile environment. Wow.
I feel like I entered this conversation without knowing what would I learn, but I end this conversation with so many things to reflect on and think. It's definitely I would have loved to talk with you more in the future.
Well, come, once the war is over, come to Ukraine to check out prototypes.
And to see the macrocosmos that maybe, until I will come, will become a universe.
I hope it will get bigger,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to remember this.